Okay, hi guys. Time to talk about the basic rhetorical situation. And I apologize if my screen is blocking out some of that text. I tried to fix it so it wouldn't be, but I can't actually see myself on the screen, so I don't know what I'm blocking or not. Um, anyway, all right, talking about the basic rhetorical situation. So for some reason, your textbook divides talking about the rhetorical situation into two chapters. And this week I just had you read chapter 1 on the basic rhetorical situation, and next week you'll read chapter 2 on the expanded rhetorical situation. Um, I have no idea why they felt the need to do it this way, um, but for your sakes, I will stick to this organization as much as possible, and we're only going to be talking about these three parts of the basic rhetorical situation in this video. And then next week, you'll learn about all the other parts of the rhetorical situation, because there's a lot more to it than just these three parts. But these three are the big ones, all right? Um, but first, let's step back. Let's talk. What is the rhetorical situation? I mean, what do we mean? What do I mean when I say rhetorical situation? Um, so, in my mind, I like to think about um, it in terms of, in the last video we talked about how we have rhetorical objects or we have rhetorical texts, right? In my mind, the rhetorical situation is anything outside of that rhetorical text that contributes an important understanding of how that rhetorical text works. Um, and then there are rhetorical strategies that are inside the text, okay? And hopefully it'll make more sense what I mean by outside and inside. I also want to stress, though, that it's not a hard and fast boundary. There are some parts of the rhetorical situation that you find by analyzing inside the text, and there are parts of rhetorical strategies that you'll find outside of the text itself. Um, but here's basically what I mean by that. Let's take, for instance, a poem, right? In our last video, we defined a poem as a rhetorical text, okay? Now, you have the text of the poem itself. That is the rhetorical object, and the text inside, all the things going on inside of that poem. But outside of the poem, you have the person who wrote that poem. You have the audience, the person reading the poem. You have the message that they're trying to say, which may be inside of the text, but also may not be. We'll talk about that a little bit more. You have the reasons that they wrote the poem. You have the time period that the poem was written in. You have all of these outside things outside the text, the history, the place, whatever's going on around that, or in the moment, that contribute to our understanding of how this text is working. Um, those things all around it, those are what we call the rhetorical situation. Um, so right now, the reason I say it's not a hard and fast boundary is because sometimes when we're doing analysis, we can figure these things, we figure out these outside things, all of this rhetorical situation, only by looking at what's inside the text. Sometimes all we have is the text. And we don't know necessarily who wrote it or who created it or who the audience is, but we make guesses about these things based on what's inside. So the boundary can be fluid, but I hope that helps you understand maybe a little bit about what we mean when we say rhetorical situation. We're talking about all of these things surrounding the creation and production and dissemination of the text. Okay, so you saw this triangle that's here in your book, and this is the right three cornerstones of the basic rhetorical situation. Now, if you read about rhetoric in other places and other textbooks, sometimes these terms might change a little bit. For instance, the message is often called the purpose, um, or maybe the I don't know. I prefer calling it the purpose. The communicator is sometimes called the creator or the speaker, or I've even seen it called the rhetor, um, person who is creating the text. Um, Audience is usually always audience. That one's pretty standard. But anyway, these are the terms your textbook uses, so these are the terms I will try to stick with in this class. Um, First, we're going to talk about the communicator. Okay, so this is the person. It can be a single person or a group or an entity, like a company or an organization. But anyway, it's whoever is responsible for creating the rhetorical object. So it could be an author, it could be a marketing team we have here, it could be um, down there we have like a director and a film producer and like the whole team working together. They're different parts of the creator, right? Um, of whoever's creating the rhetorical piece. Now, to really understand how a text is working rhetorically, it can be very helpful to understand a little about who the communicator is. Um, so sometimes it's helpful to know things like age or um, like political beliefs or nationality or race or gender. Sometimes it's important to know those things. Maybe sometimes not. You don't necessarily need to know everything, but some pertinent details can really help you understand why a piece is being created or just what is um, going on in the rhetorical situation. So, in consideration of your upcoming essay on self presentation, you are the communicator, right? This essay is looking at you in this role. You are creating the rhetorical object, which is yourself, right? You are sending um, messages about yourself out into the world. Um, so hopefully this puts you at an advantage, as in you know everything there is to know about the communicator role of the rhetorical situation. Um, you know about your purposes and your intentions more than anyone else. But it's also possible that you haven't been super aware of your role as a creator of rhetorical messages. So, this project is an opportunity for you to think critically about how you fill this role of communicator. How intentional are you with creating your messages that you send about yourself? How much time do you think about your audience? And what kind of a communicator are you? Okay, next, we're going to talk about the message, or the way I like to think of it is the purpose of um, the goal of what's trying to be communicated. Okay, so this is the part of the rhetorical situation where you might think, wait, wouldn't the message be inside the text, right? Like, isn't that what the text is? It's the message. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no, right? Sometimes the message is very clear and very obviously stated inside the text, and it's very easy to identify. But honestly, more often, the message is far more subtle and sometimes not really identifiable at all, or hard to identify at least. And I would say, especially with visual images and visual text, you have to sort of glean with the messages. You have to analyze it and pull it out. So we can practice by looking at this ad here that I've got here. So what is the message of this ad? Now, a very simple person might say, or a very simple reading might be, well, the message is to just do it. And we could make an argument for that, that the purpose of this ad is to encourage people to just do it. That's the purpose of this ad. But is it? Is that really the purpose of Nike's advertising department? Is it just to inspire people to do good athletic feats? Which, P.S., it doesn't even say do athletic feats. It says just do it, right? It's kind of super vague. Um, So, right, like the message might be inspirational, or maybe the message is don't give up, or like keep going or keep trying or whatever. Um, but to think more broadly about, I mean, like, what's the purpose of advertising in general? The Nike's purpose is to get you to buy Nike products, right? Their their message is not just to be inspirational. It is partly that. It is partly that, but it is also this larger purpose of brand loyalty. Come like Nike, like us, and buy our stuff. Nothing in this ad actually says that though, right? Nothing. And Nike is actually, this is why I chose Nike, because Nike is brilliant at this. Um, Nothing in their ads ever says buy our shoes or buy this athletic product, right? Their ads never actually do that. Their ads are all about creating this ethos, this brand loyalty. We'll be talking about ethos in our next video. Um, Making you feel loyal to the brand. But their purpose is actually, like this larger purpose of come buy our products, right? That's the point of all advertising. So you can see how messages can be layered and messages can be both obvious and stated and maybe a little bit hidden. And you sort of have to think about the larger message. So for your projects, this unit, your self-presentation essays, you need to be thinking about your purpose and your message. So maybe you're looking at your social media activity, maybe you have a caption on your Instagram post, but is that caption actually the message? Is it really the purpose of why you posted that? Or is there some larger purpose, a little more subtle, a little more hidden, that maybe you're not even entirely aware of? Until you think critically about it. So think about your actual message, your actual purpose in all of your communication and self-presentation choices, all right? Okay, finally, let's talk about the audience. Sorry, I'm probably totally blocking that image of, it's just an image of an Instagram account. Anyway, this is honestly, one of the most important pieces of the rhetorical situation. I mean, they're all important. I can't say one's more important than the other, but you will find over and over and over again, when we talk about rhetoric, we're talking about what is the audience getting? How are you connecting to the audience? What is the audience thinking? How is the audience being persuaded? How is the audience? We hit that over and over and over again when we talk about rhetoric. Um, so when we get to unit 3, we will spend a lot more time talking about the audience too. But in order to get a message across, the communicator needs to know who their audience is, what will appeal to their audience, um, and how to get their message across, right? Um, how effectively are you communicating a message to your audience? So I don't have these terms up here on the PowerPoint, but they were in your book, and so let's talk about them for a little bit. Your book talks about the addressed audience and the invoked audience, and I really like these concepts, and I want you to keep them in mind as you think about your audiences for whatever you're writing about in your paper. The addressed audience is whoever ends up actually seeing the text, um, whoever ends up viewing it, right? And and the and under this category of addressed audience of people who end up seeing it, I like to add 2 subcategories. Put this in your notes, guys. This is important stuff. The 2 subcategories I like to add is intended audience and unintended audience. So the intended audience is going to be that invoked audience. If you remember from your textbook, the invoked audience is the audience that the creator imagines in their head, the one that they're thinking about when they create a product, the piece of rhetoric. So the intended audience that actually gets that text, they're the ones that piece of text was meant for. But there's also an unintended audience sometimes. And those are people who were never meant to get that text, but they end up getting it anyway. So for an example, I study Shakespeare. That's my area of expertise. But when Shakespeare was writing his plays, um, his imagined or invoked audience was the people alive during his time, the people specifically in London at that time, the people specifically coming to see his plays, and maybe even a more specific subset of his plays. Some of them were performed for the Queen, and so his very specific intended audience was make the Queen happy. That's my goal. That's my intended audience. Did he ever imagine that 400 years from now, thousands of people all over the world would be reading and seeing and watching his plays? No, no, he probably did not imagine us at all. And if he did, he probably didn't imagine us correctly. So I call myself, and everyone today who watches or sees his plays, the unintended audience. And it can be interesting to think about how rhetoric is going to work differently on an intended audience versus that unintended audience. Are certain things going to translate across? Is the message still going to be come across in the same way? Okay, it's interesting stuff to think about. How communication changes based on that. Okay, but to bring you back to your projects, what you need to be thinking about is your audience. If you're choosing to write about social media, your social media accounts, well, then it might be easy to identify who your audience is, right? Because it's going to be your followers. And maybe you know who your followers are. You know every single one of your followers, and you can imagine them when you're posting your material. Maybe you have so many followers that you don't actually know them all, but you still have a pretty good idea. You still have a pretty good idea of what your audience is like on social media. There's actual names and people associated with those accounts. But what about other genres of self-presentation, right? We talk about wearing clothes. Um, so you can think about it this way. This is the invoked audience, the imaginary audience. Maybe when you're getting ready to go to a party and you're picking out your outfits, you have this imaginary audience in your head of maybe there's going to be that cute guy or that cute girl at this party. Maybe there's going to be someone I haven't met before, but he's the one or she's the one, right? And you've got this idea in your head and you dress to impress that imagined audience. So when you present yourself to the world, who do you imagine that you're impressing, or who are you trying to communicate with in any of those genres of self-presentation? Any of your writing, any of your social media, any place, right? Any sphere in your life where you are trying to self-present yourself, communicate who you are to other people. What role does audience play in that? Okay, we could go a lot more depth into all of these, and we certainly will be throughout the semester, but that's your basic overview for now of the basic rhetorical situation. You'll see from your term sheet that we did not cover all the terms. We will be covering the rest of those terms next week when we get into the expanded rhetorical situation. So I'll be back then to talk about them.